Good afternoon, everyone. Nice for you to join us. My name's Andy Griffiths. I'm the Deputy Medical Director of the ICB and the Armed Forces Clinical Lead for the ICB as well. And it's great to have you along. This afternoon, we're basically going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Armed Forces community and improving, hopefully, your awareness about some of the issues and some of the opportunities that exist within that. I'm joined by Chris and Andrew, who I'm sure are very capable of introducing themselves. So perhaps if we just go for Chris first and then Andrew, you could just sort of let us know a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Chris and I'm the Armed Forces Advocate down here at James Paget University Hospital in Galston. I started this role in May last year after leaving the military 9 days before, after completing 23 years service in the British Army.
Thanks, Chris. Andrew.
Yeah, hello. My name's Andrew Hayward. I'm on the Armed Forces Covenant Board for Norfolk, which I'll explain a bit about later. By background, I was a GP in a village called East Harling for many years, and then military-wise, I was a Territorial Medical Officer and ended up commanding a TA unit, but that's all a while ago now.
Thanks, Andrew. What I'll do is, for brevity, we won't go around each of the people on the call, but if you could just write your where you're currently working and what your current role is in the chat, then as we're going through, we can each have a look at where each other's position, and if there's any messages that need changing, we can then just reference those or respond to those. So I think the presentations are going to be kind of unbroken largely. So if we let the speakers kind of speak and then take questions at the end. Questions can be put in the chat and I'll keep an eye on the chat. But if you have questions, if you could just use the electronic hand, then that would be really useful. If somebody is saying something during the presentation and you desperately want to, stop them at that point, if you put your hand up, then I'll see if there's a good opportunity to just influence either of the speakers to take your question. But if we can just let them sort of get most of what they want to say out of the way, then that would be great. Is there any questions from anyone in the group about the format of this afternoon? Great. So the first one will be Chris, and then it'll be followed by Andrew. The intent of this is essentially to meet a need of, I think, quite a number of you who said that essentially you are coming across veterans and members of the Armed Forces community. And this is just the first start conversation about creating a community of practice that can support you and practically, and also your insights and your knowledge about this sort of group and what's out there, because there's a lot of it out there, as you're going to just find out. There's also an electronic, there's sort of the e-learning, which we've, I think, highlighted to you, which is also worth doing. But I think a lot of the material we're going to cover this afternoon is in the e-learning that you've already got the link to. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Chris then, just to do his section. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Andy. Right, I'm now going to share my screen. I'm hoping that the new Teams is no different from the old Teams.
Seems all right.
Okay, can everyone just see that now? It should be my front cover. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I won't bother with the introduction. Again, you all know who I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say briefly what we're going to cover today. So we're going to have a look at the Armed Forces Covenant and what that is. We'll look at the Armed Forces community and who that includes. Why we need to consider the Armed Forces community, our local population for the areas we cover. A little bit about my role as the Armed Forces Advocate in the Trust. Veteran health needs and what sometimes the main concerns could be with veterans. A little bit about a veteran awareness framework, how to improve Armed Forces community awareness within your area. Impacts that we've had since we started doing this, and then have a look at support and organisations. And then Andrew's going to elaborate on some of that after me as well. So we've got to go through things quite quickly, and then we'll take questions, we'll say, at the end. So the first thing we'll look at,
Chris, can you just tilt your camera slightly back up, because we've got your head cut off at the moment on the screen.
Oh, can you still see me?
If
Can you
that's
still
better,
see me?
yeah.
Oh, you can still see me. Okay, I thought you should just be seeing my presentation.
Now we can see you standing up, so that's
Right.
right. That's better. Thanks a lot.
Right, okay. So what I'm going to do is then I'm going to just turn my camera off for a minute. Right, okay. So have you mainly got my presentation on the screen?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got to look at the Armed Forces Covenant then. So what is the Armed Forces Covenant? And sorry, I just need to move my screen on there. Yeah, okay. So looking at the Armed Forces Duty Covenant. So before the 22nd of November 2022, we had an Armed Forces Covenant, and it's basically a state. It's developed by the government, and what it was something that organisations could sign up to, and would then be obligated to do within their body. So we look at basically the Armed Forces Covenant was something that basically said our armed forces defend the realm on behalf of the government, sacrificing some civil freedoms, facing danger, sometimes suffering serious death or injury. Families also played a vital role in supporting the operational effectiveness of the armed forces. In return, the whole nation has a moral obligation to its members of the armed forces, along with their families. They deserve our respect, support, and fair treatment. And that's what the Armed Forces Covenant was all about. It was fair treatment, treating those that have been served in the military the same as their civilian counterparts and making sure they suffered no disadvantage. 22nd November 22, that all changed, and we had the new Armed Forces Duty Covenant come into play. And since then, it was a new legal obligation that impacts on organisations that are responsible for delivering statutory functions such as healthcare, education, and housing services. The armed forces community would be affected and be the beneficiaries of this. So where before it was optional for you to sign up to this and do it, it now became you had to do this especially if you're in healthcare. And then we had this duty of due regard, which means that an organisation in the scope of the duty will need to consciously consider the unique obligations and sacrifices made by the armed forces, that it is desirable to remove disadvantages faced by the armed forces community, and that special provision may be justified in some circumstances. Basically saying that we do need to know who these people are in our organisations and pay them due regard where needed. So NHS England took this, and I've took this direct from NHS England's website, and they sort of changed it a little bit more and sort of upped it a bit. So where we were looking before in the old Armed Forces Covenant, says where people who had suffered injury due to from their time of service could be considered for priority treatment. If we look at what's on the screen now, it says that veterans should receive priority treatment where it relates to a condition that was a result of their time in service. So this is what NHS England is now telling us to do. So what does that mean? Well, unless we identify who those individuals are, how could we possibly look at giving them priority treatment? What can we give them priority treatment for? Well, maybe giving them an earlier appointment than putting them on the normal routine list. Or maybe they could be considered for other pathways. And there are specific pathways that we can put members of the armed forces community on, which we'll go into a little bit later in the presentation. So let's look at who the armed forces community is and who it includes then. So it includes those who are serving personnel, so those who are currently serving in either the Army, Royal Air Force, Royal Navy, or as a reservist. It includes veterans, and a veteran in our country is anyone who has served 1 day paid service in any of the mentioned forces or in the reserves. It is the spouse or the partner of someone who has served or is serving, and children up to the age of 18. And we always look at our veterans, when we mention the word veterans to people, we always think, a lot of us will think about looking at the pictures on the screen now as the gentleman with his green beret on holding his medal, or the gentleman in the red coats, but the Chelsea pensioners there. But we need to consider that they're not the only ones that could be veterans within our community. We could have an individual that would have served in Afghanistan during Operation Herrick 15 or 16, which was around 2012, 2013, which saw some of the worst, most intense fighting of the whole campaign, and a lot of the British casualties during that time that individual could have left the military and would now be around, would be in his early 30s, okay, and would be a veteran who would possibly experience some pretty traumatic experiences in his life. So not all veterans are old, I think is what I'm trying to say. I'm also a veteran myself at 42. I don't consider myself that old just yet. But however, when you are 42 in the military, you are definitely old. Okay, so why then do we need to consider this group of people, and why do we need to identify them? You know, we've got all these things telling us to do this, but why? What specifically do we need? So we need to. It's all about identifying them, understanding them, and then getting them the right support that they may need when they're in the community or when they're still serving. And there's a lot of unique challenges that faces members of the armed forces, such as they move around a lot. You know, for me, within 23 years of service, I never spent more than 3 years in one location. And that can have massive impacts on people, such as their families, children in education, partners or spouses in jobs who have to then move and then go to another location. If that family is accessing any sort of healthcare in a certain location, that now may be needed to be transferred to a new hospital, or if they're on a list for treatment, they need to be transferred to a new hospital. Do they maintain their place on the list when they transfer to that new hospital? All these considerations and all these stresses and strains that are quite unique to members of the armed forces that most people wouldn't normally experience or normally consider. And so, especially with schooling and partners' work, can be a massive stress on the family. And we've got to remember as well, people don't just in the armed forces don't just move within this country. Okay, at quite short notice, generally between 3 to 6 months' notice, a family could be asked to move in their entirety to a completely different country, and that could be quite a big strain, say, stress on the family. A lot of members of the armed forces could have been exposed to situations that we just possibly can't understand. And we know these from people that have experienced conflict and been on operational tours. When you're in the military, you're part of this big family. When you leave the military, you lose that, and you can feel that you're not part of anything anymore. You can feel a little bit lost in the civilian world. The military isn't great at preparing you for civilian street if you spend a long time in there. When you're in the military, everything you need is provided for you. Your accommodation, a bed to sleep in, your food to eat, your equipment that you need to do your job. It's all there for you. If you spent a number of years and you joined at a young age in the military, you then come into civilian, that you need to do all that for yourself, and that can be quite scary for some people. A lot of people can struggle with that. A lot of people feel isolated and lonely when they leave the military as well, and feel that they don't have any worth. In the military, as I said, as part of this family, you will have a job, you have a role, you would have a rank. Yeah, you were important within your organisation because you were able to give something. When you enter civilian street after leaving the military, you no longer have that, and you can feel very, a lot of people feel like they don't have any worth, they can feel lost, and they can feel isolated. And then you have unique family pressures as well, which people in the military can have. You can have a person who's been on an operational tour who doesn't want to tell anyone about what's happened to him. He feels like he's protecting, or that person feels like they're protecting their family by not telling them. And then you've got a partner that wants to know because they want to understand why this person is suddenly different from the person that left them 6 months ago. And then that could put strain on families. All unique things that we need to sometimes need to take into account when we're speaking to someone who's been in the military service, and just understanding that a little bit better. And there's another thing with the military personnel not wanting to access help, and that's not because there's a lot of it. They won't access help sometimes because they feel that staff may not understand them, may not understand their needs, may not understand what they've been through. Military people using unique language sometimes that people just may not understand in Civvy Street. We use words like scoff. And God, do you know what? They're all just gone out of my head, and I've been using them for the last 20 odd years. But there were certain words that we use that people just won't understand, and they feel that, and people don't understand them. They feel they won't understand them. They feel that there's not, like we said, not being able to understand what they've been through. That stigma of needing help, whether you're in the military or you're a veteran of the military, you will not admit you want help. Okay, we've got better within society nowadays of wanting support. And there's a lot of saying about mental health and opening up about it. That's still not going to filter down to the military for a long while. There's a macho image within the military that we don't access help, and it can be considered a sign of weakness. it's better now than what it used to be, but all those veterans that got out years ago have still got that exact same mentality. And they generally, people will not access help until the last possible minute, until they hit crisis point. So then just having a quick look at our population then across our region. So in the according to the census that was done in 2021, there was 1.8 million veterans within the UK, and that equates to roughly 3.8% of the UK population over the age of 16, and that relates to about 1 in 25 people in the UK. If you'll have a look on your screen now, areas that are covered, that we cover, you'll see that our percentages are significantly are higher than the national average. Why is that? Do we think? We haven't got any main bases or anything around here. It's mainly due to our elderly population. So any male over the age of 81 would have most likely would have been part of national service. And national service was something that was when you were made to join one of the militaries. If you weren't either in an apprenticeship or a trade, that gave something else to the country. They had to serve 2 years. This finished in 1960 with those who were doing national service who were already in national service finishing in 1963. So that's why we have an elderly population. We have a higher number in our region. It's also estimated that we have around 3,000 plus currently serving military personnel living within our region as well. So we're just going to move on to veteran health needs and look at some of the more common things that veterans may suffer from. So the 3 most common injuries, and this is all taken from the Armed Forces Commission for Health in 2021. So it is all sourced information. This isn't just me spieling off stuff to you what I think. So we're looking at the main 3 things that veterans come across is cardiovascular-related conditions, leg and feet-related conditions, back and neck-related conditions. And it's interesting to know that 43% of all medical discharge are because of MSK injuries. And for those who don't know, medical discharge is basically when the military, you are no longer fit for military service because of an injury, because of either physical health or mental health, and you leave the military and sort of find your way back into civistry. 43% is a high number when we think there's around there's a lot of people leave the military every single year. Moving on from that then, so 22% of working age veterans have issues with depression, 10% have with mental illness, and it's interesting that these figures tend to be slightly higher for those that have been involved in recent conflicts as well. So those that would have been part of the Afghanistan, the Op Eric era, seem to be, again, stepping it up a little bit more, suffering a little bit more from PTSD, and alcohol misuse has become more and more popular now than what it used to be. I think the main concern is that in all cases, these percentages are higher than what they are for civilians. So it shows that military personnel are not much, but slightly more likely to suffer from depression, mental illness. And it's, as we spoke to before, it's because of what they've been exposed to during their time in service. So just going to quickly go over my role, and this is going to be very brief. I literally wrote a big list of all my what I do, and I thought actually it's just not needed. So what I wanted to just share with you is what we do in the trust. So I work within the hospital. What do we do here? We identify all our inpatients. We ask them the question: have they ever served in the armed forces? Our outpatient departments have been educated on the Armed Forces Covenant, so they know when they are able to give priority treatment. If they don't do it, then people can access me, and I go down and speak to our outpatient departments. They also refer patients to me if they believe that they could do with some additional support. I take referrals from the community as well, and we support our staff who are veterans, and we do stuff around employment, encouraging those who are leaving the services to look at the NHS as a new career. And we do a number of schemes in our trust and to promote that as well. So it's all about raising awareness for those that work here and supporting those that we identify within our community. And the main aim for myself is to make the trust a centre point within the community for anyone who's part of the Armed Forces community needing support. So what I wanted to share with you now is a little bit about the Veteran Aware Framework. Now, and this is different from what the GP accreditation framework is, but what I do think is, if for anyone who is interested in learning about veteran awareness and trying to promote something within their organisation, this is a great framework to try and develop things. And it just gives you 8 simple steps to go by. So you look at understanding and being compliant with Armed Forces Covenant. We all know we have to do that now. So it's a case of understanding it and actually making sure our organisation does do that. Having nominated veteran champions, Armed Forces champions, sorry. So it's not just something we think about now. We have someone within the organisation driving that continuously forward. Like we said at the start of this, there is some momentum gaining at the moment, and we want to keep riding that wave until we get better and better at doing this and identifying those that need the support. Get started to receive community Armed Forces community awareness training, which is exactly what we're doing now. Establish links with appropriate nearby Armed Forces community services, local coffee mornings, local RBL branches, and I'll move on to a few other things in a little bit when we start talking about organisations that provide support. Identify members and ensure they receive appropriate care, and that means referring them to appropriate organisations that may be able to give them support or put them on different support pathways. And the most important thing, raising awareness about the Armed Forces community, because that is how we get to identify the ones that need the help the quickest and the most. So a quick thing on ours. So we only started I started this role in May last year, and we only started identifying patients in August. And these figures are a little out of date. So they're from August last year to September this year. And look at what we've achieved in that short time just by being more veteran aware within our Armed Forces community aware within our organisation. So identified 470 patients. I've engaged with 440 of them. The ones I haven't engaged with have either not wanted to engage, or I've missed them because they've sort of come in and gone on the weekend or went up and on leave. And 52 of these people have been referred to me from the community as well. So that's GP surgeries started to refer to me. Community teams are referring to me as well. Recorded a lot of visits with these people. Most importantly, I think from all this is the referrals that we've made. So 130 patients have had referrals for additional support. That's not 130 referrals. Some patients would have had multiple referrals to different organisations to support their needs. And then the 100 additional that were supported in the hospital, that may be just improving someone's patient experience while they're in hospital, linking in with social workers, IDT, caseworkers, to make sure that person gets the best support when they leave the trust. Information packs, staff trained, and then as we spoke about at the beginning, my coffee mornings have been growing and doing really well. And it's just given people within the community that are a part of the Armed Forces community somewhere to go to meet people and to chat. And I've raised more than £8,000 in the last 12 months for these projects, these ideas that I have. So this was supposed to be a video that I was going to show you, and I've left the slide on here, so because I'm actually going to talk to you about 3 cases quickly. All the cases I talked to you about, the individuals have consented because they have made me a video and it's been put together by my communications department. So I want to really show the impact of the work. It's okay talking about it and showing figures, but that doesn't give you the true picture. And the three individuals I want to talk about were all slightly different methods of support. So the first individual was someone who was referred to me from East Air Ambulance. The individual's wife had passed away. Unfortunately, when the air ambulance arrived, she'd already passed away and passed away in this gentleman's arms. He then suffered severely with mental health, what to take his own life. Was not in a very good place at all. So someone from East Air Ambulance who had listened to one of my awareness trainings rang me and said, could you give him a call? He has consented to me contacting you. I gave him a call, and we spent a couple of weeks, just because it's a bit reserved to start, spent a couple of weeks just speaking on the phone, building up a bit of a connection, building up a bit of a rapport, building up a bit of trust before we start speaking about what we could do, how we could get him support. Once we got that, I referred him on to a couple of organisations, which I'll talk about a bit more in a bit, but one was Up Courage, which would then would be specific to his support with his mental health, and Walking with the Wounded, which would then look at the more holistic support that he needed regarding housing, finances, and employment. I met that individual 6 months later, after he started his work with Up Courage and Walking with the Wounded, and the first thing he said to me was, thank you for saving my life. And that was, I met him at the East Air Ambulance, where they invited him back to have another look around the helicopter, because it was something he could never do after that day, and he managed to do it. massive turnaround. This bloke's now doing very well. He's now a councillor. He's promoting veteran awareness in his area. Absolutely brilliant story. And that was mainly around getting him that right support for his mental health by people that understand. His mental health wasn't necessarily due to his time in service, but he still wanted to speak to someone that understood the military, and that's why he went through the Op Courage programme. The second gentleman was someone that was in hospital who was that had a private arranged carer, and basically he was in that hospital a lot. We sort of picked up on this. I built up the relationship, and what we found is he'd been neglected for a number of years. This private arrangement with a friend wasn't working, and he was being taken advantage of. He had cerebral palsy. He was in his 50s, and he was pretty much bedbound. Once we found out this information, we raised a safeguard, and then we decided we needed to get him somewhere where he could be looked after. He wanted to be amongst veterans, so I spoke to the RBL, got linked with their care home, one of their care homes, filled in the application form, and he was accepted into Warwickshire RBL care home. That pleased him massively. I engaged with the social worker, and we got that sorted, and then we realised we had to then empty his house, hand that back to the council, and then get all his stuff transported, which was going to cost about £1,800. Spoke to the RBL again, and got that funded by the RBL, save social service paying for it. So basically the RBL done everything for this gentleman. He's now the face of that place where he's at, because he's one of the younger members, and they're using him in the community to support what they do. But absolutely brilliant. Another really good turnaround. It just shows it's a different side. There's all this support out there, and it can pretty much cover most aspects. Okay, I'm going to move on from that now and just go quickly over some of these. And I know Andrew's going to cover some of these more in depth, but what I get across is there's a number of organisations out there that support the armed forces. The Royal British Legion is probably the biggest in the game when it comes to money and funding. They raise around 50 odd million a year through the Poppy appeal, and at any one time have well over 100 million sat there in reserve to support members of the armed forces community. And one thing you'll notice with the Royal British Legion is that they actually fund a lot of these other charities that are on the screen as well. You also have SAFA, who are really good. These organisations are brilliant if someone needs welfare support or financial support. Okay? If it's not that, and it's more the mental health support, you go to Op Courage, which is on the screen. Anything that you see there with an op, so you've got Op Courage, Op Nova, Op Restore, and there's two others that are missing, which are Op Fortitude and Op Community. They are all ones that are either funded by the NHS or funded by the government. They are not charity organisations. Op Courage, it was set up in two. I'll speak a little bit more in depth on that one, because Andrew will cover Op Restore, which is another Pacific Pathway. But when we spoke about Pacific Pathways earlier, Op Courage is one of them, and it's a Pacific Pathway for mental health support for those who have been in the services or are still currently serving. It was set up in 2017, and since then it has received over 30,000 referrals for support. It's absolutely brilliant. I've referred over 50 people to that organisation, and every single one of them has had a benefit from that and from the treatment they give regarding mental health. They have specific programs. They understand veterans, and everyone understands the veteran community. And like I say, we have other ones. You have some organisations that are specific for certain things with individuals. So, for instance, you can see Blesma on there. Blesma is for the limbless veterans. So basically, anyone that's has lost a limb during service, okay, can be referred to them, and they have a lot of specialised regarding prosthetics and adaptations for people within their homes, within vehicles, and things like that. And they fund a lot of that sort of stuff. You have blind veterans, you have hearing veterans as well. Okay, again, support organisations for a specific thing, for those single things. And you have another good one on there, the ones that only link to certain services. So you have the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, which will support those who have been in the RAF. Really good. That can do everything from welfare up to giving funding for different items. And you have the Royal Naval Benevolent Trust as well, which again is there predominantly to support those who have been in the Navy. Fun enough, there isn't one there just for the Army, but they all cover the others all cover everyone. Okay, so literally, as I said, there's a lot of support and policy out there regarding the armed forces community, and especially around the statute, the duty, due regard, and the Armed Forces Covenant. Also, there's a link. I've put a link to my webpage on the Trust website, which, again, as I said, about a one-stop shop. I've tried to create a one-stop shop webpage which gives any members of the Armed Forces Committee guidance on how to get support, links to different organisations, employment, how they can get employment, reserve information, how they can join reserves, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information on there for individuals. Okay, I think that is me bang on time. So I'll stop sharing my screen. I will have to sit back down. Sorry, when I presentate, I have to stand up. Stop sharing.
Thanks, Chris.
And my camera's back on. Right, I'm back. Yeah, I'm used to presenting face to face, and I'm very animated. I struggle when I'm doing it on Teams.
You did a great job. So has anybody got a face-to-face question, Chris? There wasn't much. I've put some answers in the chat, Chris. Anybody got any particular thing that they'd like to ask Chris? Okay, that's great then. Oh, Marlene, hi.
Hello there. What I was wanting to know was, is there any specific referral route? Because I've been told that basically you just go through the Veterans Gateway for everything now.
No, so you can, yeah, it depends on the support that someone needs. So if it's Op Courage, for instance, you go on, you just type in Op Courage on Google and it takes you to the NHS webpage where there's a phone number for each region which Op Courage operates in. So you make a direct referral to them. Same with the British Legion. All these organisations have websites which you can just go straight to and make referrals through their national phone lines, or some of them have regional phone lines as well. What we will encourage, or what we want to achieve moving forward, is actually people know how to get quicker referrals made. So, for instance, I have professional pathways linked up with with a lot of organisations where I can go direct to case managers and regional managers to submit referrals. So I don't have to go through the national systems. So it just gets it a little bit quicker. But no, you don't have to go through the gateway. If you know the organisation you want to refer the individual to, just go directly to their website and they'll have a method of referral on there.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else before we move to Andrew? Thank you. Great, Chris, really clear. Thank you very much. Andrew, then, please.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chris. I must say that was the most concentrated amount of information I've heard in a long time, and obviously based on a lot of experience, both service experience and now with the NHS. Brilliant. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, from a GP's perspective of things. As I mentioned in the introduction, when I introduced myself, I'm on the Norfolk Armed Forces Covenant Board, which is something that's run by the County Council and aims to bring everything together. And just so you're aware, there's lots of matters that are outside of the purely medical. So, for example, they have an interest in educational things for families of current serving people. Employment, people who are ex-services who are in prison, perhaps, even transport with regard to the bases at Marham, for example, with the RAF, which has got a lot of families there and is fairly cut off from most of the rest of the world, really, when you think about it, in Marham. So lots of different things that we cover. And the other thing I just want to say at the very start is that people who are connected with the armed forces or veterans are not victims. You sometimes get the feeling from things you hear on television and from the charities that everybody is in need, has PTSD and is a victim of the circumstances, and that is absolutely not the case. It is the case for some, obviously, but I just want to emphasise that people leaving the services are extremely capable people. And just an example, personally, this is some years ago now, but we were seeking a new practice manager, had a number of really good applicants, but the very best applicant was somebody who's leaving the Royal Air Force as a medical warrant officer who'd actually been a practice manager for the RAF up at Lossiemouth. And he came to us in our little village in Norfolk, and he's retired now, but has been an outstanding practice manager. I thought I'd give you a few personal examples. bear in mind that fewer and fewer people now have personal knowledge of the services, I mean, certainly from their own careers, but even with family members. And the family members that they do have are often older. So when you're dealing with people as face-to-face, trying to help people in the community, it may well be that the other people in the practice don't have personal experience, haven't attended a meeting like this, and perhaps don't really know an awful lot about the services. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of things that I've come across over the years. This is working, remember, in a small Norfolk village, so this is not a big city or anything. I had one patient one time who, I'll keep this all anonymous, obviously, had been in the Royal Marines, had served in Oman, which is something that very few people will know about, goes back some years ago. He knew that I'd been in the Territorial Army because we talked about it previously, came along one day with an absolutely typical thing, talked about his physical problem, a fairly innocuous physical problem first, but actually really wanted to talk about what was truly worrying him. And I'll just give you a brief outline. So he's now a chap in his 60s, I guess, and in his 20s had served in Oman, had been in a situation where he was involved with having to shoot somebody, because if he hadn't shot that person, they would have shot him, in his opinion. So he did, and it turns out that person was a child carrying a weapon. So it was genuinely a threat, but as you can imagine, that action of ending up shooting a child played on his mind for many years. And to the best of my knowledge, he'd not told anybody, including his wife, who also know. And then one day he came and just opened up, and we took it from there and talked it through. As you can imagine, that was not a 10-minute appointment. That was a longer, that's why we all run behind always, and arranged appropriate help for him. And actually, we've talked about it since, and that's developed. We developed a Richard. We've developed a relationship through that. Another one, again, sort of similar, but a bit more up to date. Young chap who'd served in Northern Ireland more recently, and again had been put in a very difficult position. He was in an infantry section on patrol in the borderlands between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Was given what was, I believe, I'm sure, a lawful order to shoot somebody who was determined to be a terrorist and was thought to be carrying a weapon. Did so. And it turned out that was an innocent farmer carrying a piece of farm tools, that's all, not a rifle. So again, he was left, there was no disciplinary matter about it. He obeyed what was a lawful order. It was all carried out with correct intention, but he was left with he was the person who pulled the trigger. And again, this was something that understandably played on his mind, not for the number of years that the first guy I was talking about, but still for quite some years. And I'd seen this fellow as a patient with alcohol problems. And it was only when we talked that we asked in the question, because I didn't know that he'd served in the army. There's nothing in his records to say that he'd served in the army. And it was only when it occurred to me that was a question we all ought to be asking, that came out, opened up, and we could give him some appropriate help. Quick another one. So this is a much more simple example really, but had a patient who had injured his knee. So this is a simple physical example. Training on an assault course some years ago, who'd been in the army, injured his anterior cruciate ligament, had a ACL repair, physio, all the rest of it, left the army, started on a civilian job, and then developed osteoarthritis of the knee. This is some years later, which is a common problem, of course. And again, if we'd not had the conversation about had he served, then I couldn't have made a referral for his orthopedic. This was before the pandemic. I hasten to add, when actually orthopedic referrals actually happened. But so I could make a orthopedic referral, mentioning in the referral letter that he served in the forces, and that this requirement now was a direct result of his service, because it was an injury carried out in training originally that clearly linked up to his arthritic knee now. So that's a much more simple example. But from the point of view, if you're talking to people within the practice you work with, don't assume that your GPs or your practice nurses and so on know this. We really hope they do, because we've been going. I've certainly gone and talked to some practices, but don't assume it, and you might need, in subtle ways, to encourage the doctors you're working with to make appropriate referrals. So that's just a few examples. Leading on from that, the GPs, there's a scheme called being accredited for a veterans-friendly practice, as it's called. And again, we're using this term veteran, but it really means across the military community. So that includes all those things, all those people that Chris mentioned originally, including families, most importantly. So veterans-friendly practices are GP practice that sign up to become acknowledged as being veterans-friendly. It's a scheme that's run by the Royal College of GPs. And it's really quite simple. And again, if you're involved with practices that haven't yet done this, I'd encourage you to speak to practice manager or one of the senior GPs to encourage them to do this, because it is quite straightforward, really. And all they have to do is ask their patients if they've ever served in the armed forces. Now, most places, when I ask that for people registering afresh, it's pretty standard now to ask that question. The problem comes with people who've been registered with the practice for many years, who haven't moved in recent years, are probably not going to move. So it's not on any protocol to kind of ask them, except for people remembering to do so, which is what I'm trying to encourage everybody to do. So they need to ask if they've ever served. And then on the computer system, they can be coded as a military veteran. And that's what opens up. It gives everybody a way of working out the figures. And when referrals are made, it means that it will be tagged with that term military veteran. They also have to nominate a clinical lead. So one of the people with a clinical qualification, so that's broadly doctors or nurses or physios, for some reason, when they designed this scheme, they don't include managers, which I don't know why not, because there's a number of practice managers who served in the forces that I know of personally. But whoever designed the scheme said there has to be a clinical lead, so somebody has to take responsibility for that. Generally, they've had to have a CQC level of good or better, but I think there's some flexibility in that now, so that's not quite the same. And that accreditation lasts for 3 years and then gets that can be reapplied for. Very quickly, Chris mentioned a number of different referral routes. So this is, when I'm talking about referral, I mean medical referral. So that may not be something that you do yourselves, but it's certainly, if you come across problems where a clinical or medical referral is needed, again, if you have this knowledge, you can prod the doctors or whoever's making the referral, nurse practitioners and so on, to make sure that it's done under the Armed Forces scheme. So the one called Op Courage, which is to do with mental health, that can be a self-referral. So if you find the information from the Op Courage website and give that to anybody you're dealing with, contact numbers can be self-referral. They are really good. They are outstanding, I'd say, in terms of mental health. Are much better and much quicker than the standard mental health referral. The only thing to remember is the problem must be related to their service. And then there's a thing called Op Restore, which used to be called the Veterans Trauma Network. That's more for physical things. And again, you may well have to tell your surgeries about this. They can look it all up. It's easy to do, but it's for the physical aspects. Probably, I think they're probably more interested in the more complex issues, to be honest. But they need to know that the person has served. You don't need to go into details. You don't need service numbers or anything like that. But and actually, on that one, people often ask, do they need to prove their service? But no, they don't. It's taken on trust. And there's a form of words which I won't bore you with now, but that your GPs or nurse practitioners, service referring, can use to make sure that the hospital at the other end, particularly non-specialist hospitals, pick up on the fact that they're a person is a service veteran. And I'm sure Chris at James Paget's got this all sorted, but I'm not totally sure about King's Lynn and the Norfolk and Norwich quite so much. Although they do, when we ask, they do promise that they have a system in place for making sure that the receipt of the referral takes note of if it's being done under the Armed Forces Covenant. And that's us at 4:45. So I think I'll probably better draw a line there. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Has anybody now got any other questions or thoughts? Anybody got any experiences they want to share of their connections, contacts they've had with Armed Forces families at the moment? Molly.
Yeah, in my previous role, I've worked quite closely with SAPA and managed to get funding for furniture and things for a family that had moved. Been really useful.
Yeah, I think that the key bit for me to take home is if we never ask, we won't know. An individual is entitled not to tell you, but actually now it's not a good position to be in from a due regard perspective to not ask the question. So from a due regard perspective, we should ask everybody, because if we don't ask, we're not paying due regard. If someone doesn't wish to be identified, that's fine. They don't have to be. And in fact, it probably would be difficult to identify them if they refuse. However, and if you get in that position, the thing to do is refer that to someone to have that conversation. But it would be it's a push really to say we need to know who these people are, not only kind of in conversation, but also coded, because the coding allows us to do several things and understand where we are. Also, when the referrals happen. Also, it's flagged so that means if anyone else looks in their records and they know more about veterans, then again, they can create the opportunity for them. So I think if we can do nothing else, it's to encourage you to ask the question, have you ever served? Or anybody in your family ever served? And then to try and encourage that to be coded on the system using the SNOMED code. And I think the SNOMED code, and you guys probably, Andrew or Chris, are probably better than me, but I think it's related to military service as the code that's used.
They recommend using the term military veteran because it's got a number of subgroups beyond that. But yeah, if you just type in military veteran, that should do it on other computer systems.
Yeah, so we've got a long way to go because we've recently interrogated all of the coding in all of our GP practices, and we've got 7,500 out of our potential 48,000 from the census. Now, there will be some issues obviously related to coding and various different things, but this still means that we've got quite a significant way to go. And so to encourage yourselves to encourage the practice to ask at times of opportunity and start to code, I think is a thing that we probably should start to push. Because the start of understanding how to help people is to identify them. And I think we've still got a long way to go. A significant number of our practices are signed up. And part of the work that we're going to have to do over the next year or so is to start to reinvigorate the question the collecting of that data and ensure that the clinical or operational leads in those are given the correct information, most up-to-date information. So we will start to do that. But, you know, in terms of yourselves, you'll be there on the ground. Often it's received better face-to-face, isn't it, in terms of both relating to, you know, clients and patients, but also relating to other members of staff. So feel free to go out there and encourage. And then back this way, the offer is, you know, any of us on this call, through this link or through the emails, if you've got something you can't solve, just give us a shout, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. We're still quite a small but perfectly formed group, which is going to create a wider opportunity. But the reality is we're all here really keen to help whenever we can. And we can make, at this stage, quite personal in connections between each of us to try and get you a good and kind of responsive answer. So please don't feel that you're on your own. This is the start of the journey and understanding rather than the kind of the end of it. So any thoughts from anyone else or anything that they want to share? Anne-Marie.
Hello, yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, with the coding of the military veteran, that comes under the family member. Obviously, we spoke about that through email. So, yeah, when you code it as a military veteran, it is for their family members as well. So that will come up with a little code. But just going on by experience, I held a Veterans Day down at Lord Kitchener's back in June, and done like a little health check with them all. And that's when, if any of the veterans had anything else that they wanted to discuss, sorry, I'm working from home, you know, we had the time, and I made a separate appointment and used charities like Up Courage, Combat Stress, and they've been so supportive. And also, I don't, you guys are probably aware, but Stand Easy in Norwich as well, that offer free acupuncture for veterans with PTSD. So they've been really, really helpful as well. So yeah, there's just so much support available, but like you say, not everyone's aware of it. So yeah.
Again, isn't that a great opportunity? And the fact that you've come and volunteered to, you know, kind of join with us creates that opportunity to join some of the services, fantastic services that are there. Nobody else can access those. They're for veterans and armed forces families, but we have to let them know, which means we have to identify them.
Of course,
so,
yeah.
You know,
I mean, from our perspective, from a GP, we get most of our reception to ask that question. But even for myself, when, you know, any appointment that I have, I say, oh, you know, have you ever served in the forces? Or like you say, sometimes it will just come up in conversation anyway. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that. Jackie.
Hi, just following on from Anne-Marie, actually, I've done 2 health checks today, both of which who are veterans. They told me this, and I've only now like linked the 2 together. Now, to get them put on as veterans, do I have to now go back and get their permission to put that on their records? Or, I mean, none of them had health issues, but they come in for health checks because, you know, ex-military want to make sure that their health is up to check and everything. It's just such a coincidence that I've had 2 in today, one from the Army, one from the Air Force.
It'd be interesting to see what Andrew says.
I think you should, if that aspect didn't come up in your conversation about asking, because you didn't think of it because we hadn't had this meeting.
Yeah,
you probably should. It's just because a few people don't want that knowledge widespread for all sorts of different reasons. But the vast majority, I've never met anybody who declined, but yeah, there are a few.
Yeah, I mean, both of them were very proud of, you know, being in the forces. So, but yeah, I will just give them a courtesy call and say, oh, you mentioned it to me, do you mind if I put that on your record? And then say, if you have any problems, there is places out there for you, so that they are then aware that there is somewhere they can go if they needed to. So
I think if somebody's freely presented that information to you, it would be like anybody giving you any information. You would write it in the patient's notes because it's a consultation. And it's
Yeah.
no different. It's just that you would then put it as a code. I think
Yeah.
if somebody says they don't want it to be known, I think the duty of due regard changes the dynamic.
Mhm.
It's not now a question of saying, you know, would you mind if, it's actually, we have a statutory requirement to identify veterans. If someone then identifies themselves to you, you're within your rights then to capture that information, unless they tell you not to. I wouldn't say it's the other way around. Otherwise,
Okay.
we'll end up, because a duty of due regard says that we are required by law to identify veterans so that we can pay them duties of due regard.
Okay. So
If a practice, if for instance, if somebody walked in through the door and on their new patient check, they got asked specifically that, you wouldn't then say, is it all right if I code you? You would just tick the box to say
Yeah.
coded. So I think if someone comes into you and freely tells you that they're a veteran, then it's just like writing down in their notes. And it
Yeah.
would then be inappropriate not to tick the box.
Yeah.
But I think if somebody kind of if somebody then says they don't wish to, but I think in real terms, the best practice is probably to say, thanks very much. Do you mind if I annotate your notes?
Yeah.
But what I wouldn't want to do is get ourselves into this position. I think that due regard requires us. And I think if anybody mentions as part of a conversation a health problem, you don't normally say, do you know what, is it all right if I put this health problem you just mentioned in
Yeah,
my notes?
yeah.
Are you with me? So
Yeah.
I understand there's a sensitivity about it, but I think that it's a consultation that you're in.
Yeah.
It's a practice-backed activity that they've come to you with. They've released that information to you. They have lots of sensitive information, and our medical records are secure.
Yeah.
If someone says to you, "I don't wish it to be," that's a different thing. I would honour that. But someone's given that up freely.
I'm very, very proud to be so. So I'll just code them then. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any thoughts or questions before we give you your 3 minutes of your life back? Claire, anything from you at all?
Just a massive thank you to Chris, Andrew, and yourself, Andy. I've been wanting this for a very long time now, and it's really good to get this training, this awareness to our workforce out, finally going live, and I feel like we've made a big step today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chris, for your engagement today. Much appreciated. To all of the rest of you, please feel free to contact us if there's any sort of questions. But again, the whole principle is we need to pay due regard. We are now required to. It's the right thing to do, and also it's the thing that we must do. And we can't help people if we don't know who they are. You know, it's really challenging. And as you are beginning to work out, unlike most citizens, there are significant amounts of different bespoke services accessible to the armed forces community. We just need to join those two things up. It's a win-win, really. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for taking the time out, and thank you very much for thinking about the armed forces community in your practice. It is very much appreciated. I'll let you all go. This will be recorded. We'll post it onto the web page, and I'll put the web page link onto the chat. There's also a post training survey, which I'll just post to you now. If you wouldn't mind completing that for me, that would be really useful just to see how we've done today and whether or not it's met your needs. So thanks very much for this afternoon. We will see you. Oh, and have a lovely Christmas.
Okay.
Andy, really quickly,
Yeah.
Would you just be able to send me that further information about that Newmarket Racecourse event?
I haven't got it yet.
No,
It
but
was
when you
just
do, would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. I'll send it to everyone. I'll use this group now,
Yeah.
and I'll turn that into sort of like a newsletter type post type thing. That's the intention. So yeah, you'll get it by once you've had your training. You're on my list. I'll just start sending you stuff. You
Okay,
know,
perfect.
it's really good. It was really good last year.
Yeah, I can't
did like
fault the armed forces training, the network training. That was
Great.
9:30 to 4:30. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah,
Great.
really, really good. So yeah,
Yeah.
look forward to meeting hopefully and working together and doing something. It'd be good.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thanks for coming along.
No, thank you. Have a good Christmas, both of you.
And you
You
take
too,
care,
Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Bye.
Good. Thank
Do
you.
you want to press stop stop
Yeah, I'll
recording?
stop. I'm reminded.